Okay, I'm starting a little minute early. Last time I was told I had some technical difficulties, like some people couldn't hear me, like maybe my sound went out. So I'm going to open up this time to go like, hey, if you're not hearing me, let me know. And I'm probably just going to have to yank out my microphones. It's odd that I think maybe the thing that perhaps I thought would help me or would help you hear me more is actually helping you hear me less. I've recently, yesterday when I did my live stream, I found my live stream on YouTube, uploaded it, and I haven't really listened to it all the way, so I have no idea if those technical difficulties are there throughout. The opening sounded pretty normal to me, and I sped through it a bit to make sure, like, okay, at some point in time, am I letting out? I don't know. So today I'm going to be doing something a little different. Yesterday I had more of a plan as far as like what I wanted to do, because I actually had a crazy crossover idea with the Muppets and the Avengers, and I actually had something somewhat plotted out, or at least something in my mind. Today I only have a little thing that I think I might be able to do with today's subject, which is the Fantastic Four meet the Incredibles, or maybe even versus the Incredibles if we want to go that way, because, well, that's how usually these team ups work. Let me take a moment to do a little bit of adjustment here, see if I can't get this more centered. I'm actually using two smartphones to do this thing. One is designed for TikTok, the other designed for YouTube Live. Either way, I should be live on both of them, and perhaps maybe you guys can see me on that. Hopefully you like this black background I've been using, so if you don't like that, let me know. Anyway, so we're going to keep going here. This time, oh yeah, I'm also going to see about if anybody wants to join in on this discussion, which I realize isn't really, I mean, they really only give me a few words that I can use to describe this thing, and I just went crazy crossovers part 2. Hopefully you guys got my invitation last week, knowing that I was going to do this kind of live chat on this thing. And as far as, I guess I'm going to talk about just, oh yeah, and so we would love to have people here, and maybe am not doing it at the right time, and maybe this isn't the right thing for me to do, just period, because honestly, I'm not even, I mean, I'm trying to build up more of a following. I thought I'd talk about things I want to talk about, or that I'd like to talk about, that maybe would be at least entertaining for you to watch. But hey, I'll be very honest. Can I really chat about stuff like this? Because I would like that very much. So let's see. Yeah. So I'm just trying to figure out, like, oh, hello. Yeah. Somebody just sent me a hi. Blaze Finlay. Thank you very much for watching. I appreciate that. And if you have something to add, is there anything you can add to this conversation? I have no idea how that can work. I hope so. Maybe you can leave a message or something like that if you want to hear me talk about something on this thing. And because that would be great. Reminds me, shoot, I got my computer up now. Let me see if I can't follow you on TikTok. I mean, hey, assuming I don't follow you already. Let's see. So anyway, so I might be doing an audience of 1 here, or I might be doing an audience of hopefully 1,000, or hopefully more than that, because I would love to do that. In fact, I'm going to invite someone as a guest here, and I have no idea how that'll go down, because if I'm doing it on YouTube, I might not be able to, or if I'm doing it on TikTok, I might not be able to hear it on YouTube Live. Oh, it's so much fun to figure stuff out like this. This is how we learn here. We make mistakes, we fall on our face, kind of like the movie Meet the Robinsons. But hey, I'm not here to talk about Meet the Robinsons, although that could be a separate show. I'm still here to talk about Fantastic Four meets the Incredibles here. And I think for me, I think the best thing I can do is talk about my relationship between both these intellectual properties. Both owned by Disney, by the way. After all, Disney owns Marvel, and the Fantastic Four was, of course, the very first, actually, Fantastic Four, guess I'll get started with that. If you know anything about comic books or Marvel specifically, then you know that Fantastic Four was essentially this big thing. Subscribe to you, Blaze Finlay. Anyway, Fantastic Four was, of course, one of Marvel's first comics. Now, Marvel had appeared, they had this thing back in the 1940s called Timely Comics, and then they basically kind of spread out. I don't know what was their, yeah. So, I could contact a lot of people, couldn't I? All right, just hit invites. All right, maybe that'll do. Okay. Oh, hey, how you doing? All right. Oh, creator disconnected. Looking for another creator. All right. Okay, that's fine. So, oh yeah, I guess we're gonna do this. Hey, can you hear me? Oh shoot! Unfortunately, I can't hear you. That's a bad thing. Okay, I'm gonna try the. It's disconnected. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Let's see. So, I guess what I could probably do is, okay, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm just gonna do this. I'm gonna disconnect this mic. Ugh. Hopefully you guys can still hear me. I'm taking a chance on this. Let's just hope that this works out really well, because I wasn't able to hear anything on the other thing. Maybe I need a one of those headsets or something like that. That clearly could be a problem. If you guys want to chime in on the YouTube thing to make sure, like, hey, okay, thank you, Blaze, for telling me you can hear me on YouTube. But on TikTok, I think I might have gotten some little non-feedback there. So let's see here. Okay, so let's see. I'm going to continue my conversation with the Fantastic Four. I think they started in 1962, maybe, essentially. And when you talk about Fantastic Four, you always talk about Stan Lee, because we all know Stan Lee was sort of like the man of comics there. Oh, hey, I got another person in. 180 VR? Hi. All right, so we're definitely going to have to subscribe to you. So with Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, they essentially, I believe they were told by the uppity-ups at Marvel, because I think that was how that worked back then, that basically they were told to create something like Justice League, because at the time DC Comics had just put their heroes together in this one group. Fantastic Four, though, essentially, those were characters that had not really appeared in other comics, although there's an exception kind of with the Human Torch, and I'll get into that. But essentially, they were told, like, hey, we want you to create a group like Justice League, a super team. So they basically said, okay, and they created this, this foursome of superheroes that we all know as the Fantastic Four. So yeah, and that's kind of then history was made. For some reason, this comic was huge. I don't really know. They basically kickstarted the entire Marvel comic universe for some reason. So, and they were big, and they were, of course, you know, I'm sure you know the characters by heart, with Reed Richards, Mr. Fantastic, the Super Stretch Guy, the Invisible Girl, who was later renamed Invisible Woman, and that was like 20. It took 20 years for that to happen. Trust me. And then they, you know, Invisible Girl, she could turn invisible, and she had force fields. That was a big thing. And the Human Torch, which I might as well address this now. Remember how I said that Marvel was actually known as Timely Comics? Back in the 40s, they actually created a character known as the Human Torch, who was essentially a robotic man that was able to flame himself. His body was able to surround himself in flames. And then basically, I think they just they either killed him off, or just like Timely Comics just stopped doing superhero stories or something like that. I'm not really certain what the actual real world explanation for this is. In the comic books, I think they basically just said that the Human Torch, the original one, when Nova died, and the body was sort of used by Ultron later to make the superhero The Vision. And I'm not sure if that's still continuity. I remember there was a time in the comics where a new writer took over and basically decided to get rid of the whole The Vision was always the Human Torch kind of thing. They just kind of did that. So yeah. And then, of course, the best thing was, of course, the Thing. That was, of course, the big breakout character. Now, I'm told that the Thing is pretty much, he's kind of supposed to be like Jack Kirby himself. And you know what? I don't deny that. Here's something I'm going to have to say about Jack Kirby. I'll bring this up now because, as I said before, Fantastic Four was created by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. But here's the thing. I once looked at at the comics that Stan Lee was producing per month, and it seems impossible that he was able to have this amount of output. So I think back then Stan Lee had what was called the Marvel method. And I think what he did is he just sort of briefly had some plot outlines, and then he would often get the artists to essentially do all the details in there. So there's a lot of speculation that really it was Jack Kirby that was sort of taking the lead on a lot of these projects that Stan Lee was essentially responsible for. I have no idea how true that is. I mean, we know when it comes to the world of comic books, there were a lot of creators that got the shaft from their own company. I'm told that the original writers of Superman, one of them essentially died penniless and as a janitor or something like that. I have no idea if that story is true. I can tell you that that apparently Jack Kirby was not treated very well at Marvel, and he eventually went to their rival company DC and did a lot of work for them there. I'm not a big fan of Jack Kirby's art, his early art and even his later art. His characters were very extremely bulky, muscular-looking men that were always they almost looked like men if you like put an air hose to them and puff them up a lot. Even the women kind of look like this. But then again, I probably need to study more of Jack Kirby's art in order to really get the feel for how this worked. And I remember seeing Jack Kirby's art like in the late 80s or early 80s, and it still looked like that, which kind of made me go like, geez, this guy really had this kind of strange way of drawing people. But here's the thing, only Jack Kirby could have drawn some of these strange over-the-top characters that were in the Fantastic Four. Like we had Silver Surfer, Galactus, Doctor Doom, all those villains that were Mole Man that were involved in this world that I'm told, like, I've read a few of these older Fantastic Four issues. I don't really remember them very well. But I have to admit, for the time, they were very imaginative. You were getting an epic story within every issue, all for like, what, 10, 12 cents? That must have been like a bargain for, I'm sure, younger audiences back then, and maybe even older audiences who might have been reading comic books en masse back then. I have no idea. I will have to say that by the time I started reading Fantastic Four, it was in the early 80s or mid 80s or something like that. And there was an artist who took over and writer that took over named John Byrne that I wasn't really a fan of him, but I slowly became a fan after reading Fantastic Four. And I remember the day that I picked up my first issue of Fantastic Four. It had the Mask of Doom. It had this storyline where Dr. Doom's mask is starting to float around in the Baxter Building, the Fantastic Four's headquarters, and starting to shoot things. I might as well get into the origin of the Fantastic Four while I'm here. Since I said before that the Fantastic Four were not like a put-together group of superheroes, they have a very unique origin because it is all the same origin. The Fantastic Four were astronauts, or essentially Reed had designed this rocket to go into space, and he seemed to insist on wanting to fly it himself. Now, I have no idea. I think he actually had to break the law in order to do this. And he took with him his fiancée, or maybe they weren't, he was girlfriend, I guess, at the time, Sue Storm. And Sue's brother went along for the ride. And also Ben Grimm, who was Reed's best friend and college roommate. And Ben was a pilot, so he was, I don't know if he probably never flown into space before, but he was obviously had enough experience to fly a rocket. And so they launch this rocket into space, and then they get hit by cosmic rays, which are a real thing. I actually looked this up. And, just like gamma rays are. A lot of this stuff in comics is actually real science made weird. And so essentially, the Reed, Sue, Johnny, and Ben get hit by these cosmic rays, and when they land, when they I think they have to crash land, essentially, is what happens. They all get their powers, and they just sort of have them. And some of them have great control over them, and some of them do not. With Ben is always the most interesting character because he just sort of is surrounded by this, I don't know, gloop, I guess. If you look at some of the early issues of the Fantastic Four, it seemed like Ben had sort of this globby sort of thing, but it was always very rock-like around him. And I think more modern artists kind of turned it into sort of orange bricks. And I think that was more sort of an advancement of the artist that was just sort of a natural, kind of a natural sort of thing. It's kind of like how if you read, like, I don't know, early editions of, say, Peanuts or Garfield, I mean, the artists drew their characters in such a way that they evolved over time. And I got the feeling that maybe Ben Grimm's character wasn't really nailed down as far as how they wanted to do sort of that thing look. But it eventually came down to sort of orange bricks seems to be the sort of the aesthetic that they kind of eventually landed on, and this thing has been like that ever since. And there are other things that just kind of have, yeah, because the Fantastic Four is unique in the sense that where if you look at a lot of things like the Avengers that I mentioned last time and the X-Men, they have this roster that is constantly changing. And there are very few characters that have been there from the very beginning. With the Avengers, I mean, I think Iron Man, Captain America, and Thor, I think are probably still around maybe, but they, of course, have gone to and fro. They just have done that. With X-Men, I think Cyclops is probably still around maybe. I have no idea. I mean, and then characters like Storm and Wolverine came actually much later, but have since been sort of linchpins of the group. I mean, that's just kind of how that has worked. With the Fantastic Four, it seems to always be Reed, Ben, Johnny, and Sue, and since they call themselves the Fantastic Four, it just makes sense that they stay that way, right? Yeah. Okay, so, oh gosh, I've talked a lot about the Fantastic Four. Okay. I'm going to accept a co-host here. Hopefully this works. And let's see. Oh, hey, can you actually hear me? Hey. All right. Can I hear you? Hey. All right. Okay. Yeah, I can kind of hear you and stuff. Oh, let's see. I've been having problems with sound on the TikTok thing. You can hear me okay, right? Oh, good. Okay, I'm getting a nod. All right. Okay. You're probably hearing him. Yeah, he has an echo. Okay. You mute him. I could do that, couldn't I? When you say him, I think you probably mean my other phone here. I don't know if I want to do that. Okay. Can you see the other guy? Yeah, I can see him. Mm-hmm. Good to hear. Good to see you. Yeah, I can see him, but can't really hear him. Yeah. Yeah, there is a bit of a breathing or something going on in the background there. I'm not really certain how. If you mute the other person. I guess I could. I don't really want to mute another guy. I mean, after all, I'm sure he's joined up with me too, but yeah. This is how we learn, isn't it? Okay. Yeah, I can't quite figure out how to mute him. Your name is Brenda? Yeah, follow me. Okay, definitely will. Oh, hey, looks like I got another. We have the world's hottest hot sauce right here. If anybody donates a galaxy, I will drink the world's hottest hot sauce. Appears I'm getting off topic here. All right, so let's get the ball rolling. Here it is. One galaxy. This is how we drink it. Oh, man. What are you guys' thoughts? You gotta put a little bit more in there for galaxy. Oh, there's a little bit. That's like less than a cafecito. They gave us this inside of the restaurant. That is the world's hottest hot sauce right there. Wait, did you go to the chicken place? Chicken place? We went to a Mexican chicken place. No, we went to a taco place. Yeah,
Yeah, so is that for some reason my screen says 0 viewers. Something must be malfunctioning.
Okay, right now I'm having some issues here.
Seriously malfunctioning here. I'm sure that this is not true. My screen for some reason says 0 viewers. I don't know why it says 0 viewers, but we have the greatest challenge in the world right now. I don't know where everybody is. Where they go? What's he doing? What's up? What's up?
Well, that depends. You can hear me, right?
Yes, we're ready for the challenge.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
World's hottest hot sauce. This guy on the phone is going to ingest it right now. If we get one galaxy, he's gonna drink the whole thing. He's gonna drink the whole thing. How do you flip screen?
Oh boy.
What are your thoughts on that?
Drinking hot sauce? It's a little extreme. It's been done before, but hey, maybe you could do it in a different way.
This one has ghost pepper, Carolina Reaper. This has every single hot sauce, and they put it in a taco stand. Has it been done before? It's never been done, but he's about to do it right now. All I get is this. Come on, guys! One galaxy. Something must be going wrong. This has not been done before, sir. I don't know where you got that information from. Oh, perfect. Mahag. Oh, she left. Yep, so just looking for that galaxy. Whenever it's on the way, just let me know.
Okay.
Galaxy, guys, come on. For our Iceman. There's nothing talking.
Oh boy.
So, what's going on here?
Oh, for me?
Yeah.
I was just hosting a little show. What's that?
My business partner was asking if the galaxy's on the way.
No, I'm afraid I don't know how to do that, and I don't really know how to. I'm actually trying to log off of this because I don't really think I can really help you that much. And I was kind of doing a show and kind of got interrupted.
You just have to do that. Go on BowieClothing.com, sign up, and donate for our hot sauce challenge.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you have any businesses that you need us to do anything with, this is our first proposition. Perfect. We have 0 viewers.
Well,
I think he's trying to leave. Can't leave. Got you hostage. Where you going?
Yeah, you definitely had me, all right. Hey, wait a second. I might as well take advantage of this. Oh, okay. Looks like I'm onto that. I apologize, everybody. I somehow got sucked into something, and this is what I was afraid was going to happen when I was doing this. So yeah, I guess I'll continue talking about the Fantastic Four. I think I've mostly, yeah. So I think I was talking about how they have like this weird thing where it's essentially just the 4 of them. So I might as well start talking about the Incredibles because I think this is the first time I've actually even brought them up, even though this is essentially the Fantastic Four versus or with the Incredibles. And how the thing about that is the Incredibles, of course, were created by Brad Bird. The first film came out in 2004 with Pixar. I'm sure he'd been working on it several years beforehand, and he was, of course, most famous before that for kind of being a supervising producer on The Simpsons. And he had attempted this show called The Family Dog, which I think Tim Burton kind of wanted to help out with that, but it didn't really go over very well. And so, it was one of those projects that got stuck in development hell, and when they finally released it, nobody cared. So then he got really famous in 1999 for The Iron Giant, a film that was flopped on its initial thing, but I think achieved gold status in its DVD/VHS run because it's that old. And then when he kind of joined up with, I think, Pixar and produced several films for them, or a few films for them. One of them was Ratatouille. And the first Incredibles film introduced us to a family of superheroes that was actually very similar to the Fantastic Four. There was essentially a patriarch there who was named Bob, I believe, Bob Parr, who had the powers of super strength and conceivably invulnerability, I guess. I actually really couldn't tell what his powers were based on what I saw on them. And then, of course, there was Mrs. Incredible, aka Elastigirl, who had the stretching powers. So that was more kind of like a very similar thing to, in Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. And I guess Mr. Incredible was more sort of like Ben, but without all the rock sort of thing going on there. And then they also had like sons here. And they had like one son who was like a super fast speedster named Dash. And Dash is very similar to the Human Torch, although he didn't have any flame power. But I did like the fact that he had some sort of ability like that, which was, plus he also had like his huge ego, and it was very similar to Johnny Storm. I felt like Dash Parr was the essentially the Johnny of the team was what was going on there. And then they had a daughter named Violet who had the power to essentially turn invisible and also make force fields. So that I felt like was a direct ripoff of the Fantastic Four. I don't really know if that's like, I kind of feel like, I actually remember hearing that when Sue, the Invisible Woman, first came around, she only had that power invisibility, and then later on developed the ability to make force fields. So they kind of, and as a result, remember that writer I was talking about, John Byrne? They really made Sue the most powerful member of the group, because she could do a lot with those force fields. And I mean, there was a lot that you could do with that. I mean, the fact that you could just, stretch out with her force field and stuff like that gave her this huge telekinetic advantage over all her teammates. And they really tried to capitalize as far as what those abilities were. And I always liked that. Anytime Sue's abilities were used creatively, which they were a lot in late 80s versions of Fantastic Four, they could really make that work. So yeah, so we had The Incredibles there, and I have to admit, The Incredibles was one film that I watched in the theater and I kind of liked, and the more times I watch it, the more time I liked it. I don't know if you have a movie like this where the more you've watched it, the more you like it. Maybe you didn't like it initially, but the more you've watched it, the more you've kind of going like, wow, I really like this movie every time, and you see what a gem it is. I think The Incredibles is that gem. I actually like the direction that they go with the story. And here's the thing about The Incredibles. It has, if you look in the background, there are a lot of other superheroes going on. I'm not just talking about Frozone, but there are other superheroes in this world, and it's a very well-developed superhero universe. If you ever had the DVD, you can look at the special features, and they have like origin stories and all sorts of information about all the superheroes in the background. And I kind of thought that's kind of cool, actually. They're actually almost as developed as, say, Marvel, so that is super cool. That is very cool for them to have something like that. What can I say? It's a unique premise, and I'm very glad that they kind of went with it. Now, as far as some of the stuff that I've seen with The Incredibles 2, I have to admit, this is a film that the more I watch, the more I hate it. I felt like this, I mean, it took like maybe, I don't know, 13, I don't even, maybe 13 years, maybe 17 years. 15 years. I can't remember what year The Incredibles 2 came out, but it took them a long time for them to make a sequel. And honestly, the first Incredibles film didn't really need a sequel. And I think one of the things I didn't like about The Incredibles 2 is if you boil it down, the plot shouldn't happen. If you look at how the plot of The Incredibles 2 is structured, there's a villain named Screenslayer, who, as it turns out, because the film needed some huge plot twist, is related to a character in the film who is essentially trying to make superheroes legal again. If you're not familiar with the world of The Incredibles has a very interesting premise that all superheroes were essentially outlawed due to, say, frivolous lawsuits. It's a very interesting take on superheroes because I think that would happen. Like Mr. Incredible is essentially sued because he tried to save a person from jumping off a building, which I think is really interesting, the concept of this, that it's like, wow, that probably would happen, wouldn't it? And it's like, yeah, that probably would. So it's very clear that Brad Bird took a little from the playbook from the Fantastic Four. Did he rip it off? No. I think The Incredibles is really doing its own thing, and it's really in its own little universe that really kind of works. Now, yes, they are owned by the same thing. Could The Incredibles be brought in to this universe by some sort of weird, like, I don't know, Crisis on Infinite Earths event? And if you know what I'm talking about, if you've read enough comics do stuff like this, where they rewrite the entire universe, but it's not just the writers rewriting it, but they actually have some sort of cosmic sort of explanation. They create some sort of big event in the comics universe to sort of do that. And as they just kind of hand wave away a lot of the complications that arise from these things. And this has made reading comics kind of a mess because you're following characters that have been around for decades, yet they've only aged years if you're lucky. And that's what makes it really hard. And this is what makes it really hard in, say, the Fantastic Four, because they essentially have to stay the same age. This has given rise to, essentially, because the Fantastic Four have had kids too, and essentially we have watched them grow up. There's a particular Fantastic Four annual. If you're not familiar with an annual it's a once per year event that a comic puts on that usually has a story that's not related to the continuity, but sometimes is, where Reed and Sue actually gave birth to, Sue gave birth to a son named Franklin. I actually think they've given birth to a daughter too, named Valeria, and I think Dr. Doom has sort of taken her, and yeah, whatever. And with Incredibles 2, I kind of felt like the main villain of that, Screenslayer, didn't seem to work within the environment they were going for, because The Incredibles is very much stuck in the world of the early 60s. That was apparently part of the design of the characters. And Incredibles 2 takes place seconds after The Incredibles 1. So much so they had to change the voice actors for, say, Dash and stuff like that, because that kid had grown up. And, and they had to change a few of the voice actors as well, because they just had to do that. There just wasn't a lot going on in Incredibles 2 that I thought was rather interesting, whereas Incredibles, the first one, has a lot of quotable lines and a lot of great scenes in it that are really trying to flip the script when it came to superhero movies. Incredibles, the first one, takes place before the Marvel Universe was even established, for crying out loud. So, yeah, they were really ahead of their time there. But it's also sort of taking things from, like, I don't know, say, James Bond movies or something like that. A lot of 60s stuff like that. Even in Incredibles 2, you actually see the characters watching the show Johnny Quest. And there were a lot of, like, superhero-type adventures in the 60s that showed up. Heck, the only reason why I know about the Fantastic Four is because there were several cartoons that I remember watching as a kid. There's one specific one that Marvel made in which they really adapted a lot of the comic book stories. In fact, Stan Lee wrote the teleplay for a lot of them. So a lot of those stories are very comic accurate to what was going on there. Then they kind of made this other Fantastic Four cartoon where they couldn't get the Human Torch, and I think there was sort of a licensing thing going on there. Some people say that the Human Torch was taken out of the group because, you know, he was like fiery and they didn't want kids to think like they could play with fire or something like that and not get hurt. I've heard that that is just a rumor. I don't know. But in a sense, I kind of like the idea of this that they were kind of going for, that it was like, hey, it's like that, you know, there was just a bunch of superheroes and that they were just kind of doing their thing. And oh yeah, and for that one, so it was sort of like the Fantastic Three, but they added Herbie the Robot, who actually still appears, I'm told, in the comics and has shown up in the in some other things as well. He showed up recently in the Fantastic Four movie, and yeah, I haven't even talked about the Fantastic Four movies they made because there were a lot of them. In 1992, Roger Corman, a filmmaker who you're going to have to look up, bought the rights to the Fantastic Four and wanted to make this weird sort of very low budget movie. And I think he made the movie just so he could keep the rights, but he never released the movie. But you can find the movie pretty much anywhere, like on YouTube or something, because it got dumped there somehow. And yeah, and then there were the Tim Story ones, like the original one with let's see. The guy that plays, Captain America played the Human Torch, and Michael Chiklis played the Thing. Those two versions, those two films. I actually kind of like those films, but I have to admit they aren't as groundbreaking as, say, the X-Men or Spider-Man films were, or some of the other Marvel films are out there. That was back when Fox owned the rights to the Fantastic Four, and they were really trying to make it like. I get the feeling that there probably would have been some sort of X-Men Fantastic Four film if they would have made that work, but they couldn't. They were really trying to squeeze as much as they could out of that, and it never took off as much as, say, X-Men did. And then they lost the rights to X-Men, and then the Marvel Cinematic Universe came along and then made those things look like second fiddle, really. So yeah, and then we finally got the official MCU Fantastic Four movie just a few days ago, just a few months ago with that Fantastic Four First Steps. It's not bad. I've watched it, and they actually do adapt the story of Galactus somewhat well. It's one of those. The Fantastic Four and Galactus is one of those stories that is considered just a landmark of comics, and and hey, that's just kind of what that is. Okay, so now I'm going to talk about my idea of mixing these two together. So this is where you kind of want to pay attention here. Okay, so here's my idea about mixing the Fantastic Four and the Incredibles. So I'm going to go with the idea that the Fantastic Four and the Incredibles just take place in different universes. Now, there's been a lot of very popular superhero team-ups where they sort of pretend that these characters have existed in the same universe the whole time. Superman and Spider-Man have had their own team up. They've had two of them, actually. And in both of those, they sort of pretend that they've always been in the same universe. Yeah, don't ask me how that works. So yeah, so Dr. Octopus and Lex Luthor can just be in the same prison together. So and I actually think that's sort of how that story went out. Superman and Spider-Man actually have a fight, and I believe that there's a depowered Superman or something like that they depowered him, so the fight is actually an even match, because I think we know that in a fight between Superman and Spider-Man, Superman would just go grab Superman by the neck, and that would be that. It would be a pretty one-sided fight. I know that Batman has faced Superman a few times, but Batman has prep time and kryptonite on his disposal to make it a bit more matched. But there was also one time in the early 80s, they had an X-Men Teen Titans team up. This exists. Marvel put out this comic here, and they got special permission from DC to use the Teen Titans in it. It was done by a Marvel writer, Chris Claremont, who was writing the X-Men, and did a pretty good job adapting the team in their universe where these two teams exist together. So basically, for that to work out, essentially, the X-Men universe is kind of a strange one because mutants are considered essentially marginalized people and persecuted people. They sort of fit well in this kind of thing where essentially the Teen Titans are essentially glorified superheroes and have their own little island in the East River with their headquarters, and no one seems to have a problem with that. In fact, they welcome them. So that's kind of always a thing. The X-Men Teen Titans crossover is very odd. It has Darkseid as the main villain with Dark Phoenix, who at the time was dead. Yeah, it gets kind of, they were really sort of pulling out a lot. And also they have an appearance from Terminator. And when I say Terminator, I'm not talking about the Arnold Schwarzenegger half man, half robot thing. I'm talking about Slade, aka Deathstroke, which they eventually had to rename him and rebrand him as that because it was like, yeah. But that character, Wade Wilson, or I'm sorry, not Wade Wilson, Slade Wilson. Yeah, Deadpool was essentially a ripoff of this character, so I'm told. But yeah, he was a big enemy of the Titans back then, and yeah, he was. Anyway, so he actually showed up in that as well. So they, you know, he wasn't on the cover though, which is kind of weird. Anyway. So here's the thing. In this particular one that I was working on, Incredibles, Fantastic Four, they're in different worlds, okay? They just are. So I have this idea of starting this adventure with Doctor Doom. If you know anything about Doctor Doom, he's kind of a villain they really can't adapt this guy. And they're going to try with Robert Downey Jr. And that might work, that might not. I don't know. I don't feel it would. That's just my personal opinion. The thing about Fantastic Four that most of the movies get wrong is they are not villain beaters. They are not the type of guys that go after supervillains. They are guys that are essentially explorers and scientists who just happen to have superpowers. And so as a result, they attract a lot of other villains and stuff like that who have some sort of power or something like that that is unusual about them. And they'll often get involved in stuff like this. So that's kind of what the Fantastic Four's deal are. A lot of times when they do Fantastic Four movies, they introduce Doctor Doom and they say, ha, here's the enemy and here's the thing. Or I'm sorry, here's the good guys and here's the bad guy. And then they kind of do that. I didn't even discuss that 2016 Fantastic Four film that was so bad. It was one of the worst films I'd ever seen. And I remember watching this film and just thinking, like, I've never seen any film that didn't engage me at all, which was so strange because these superhero films are made to capitalize on our familiarity with them. And I was very familiar with the Fantastic Four and their origin story, and I just didn't want to see this. The thing about Doctor Doom is the fact that he is kind of Reed Richards' polar opposite, whereas Reed Richards uses his science and he wants to use it for the greater good, and he realizes he has gifts. Dr. Doom also realizes that, but he thinks he's the king of it all. He's the guy. He's the guy that goes like, because I am so smart, I am above you all. And the thing about Dr. Doom is he does feel like he is all of that. And I remember watching one of Linkara's shows about Dr. Doom and how Doom really feels like Doom is that guy who feels like he is the greatest in the world. And every movie version of him never delves into that territory. It's what makes Doctor Doom kind of fun, but it also what makes him rather, you sort of sympathize with him for the wrong reason. You sympathize with him because you realize, like, he's never going to realize that he's just not all that, is he? And in fact, everything that he does against the Fantastic Four and all of his experiments seem to just solidify the fact that he thinks he's all that. Now, the one thing you should know about Dr. Doom is he's got three things that are always going with him. He's trying to take over the world. He's trying to beat the Fantastic Four. And he's also trying to contact the Netherworld. This is something that Doom has in his origin story from the get-go. One time in college, he was trying to create a device to contact the Netherworld because Doom lost his mother at an early age. This is a lot of trauma in his life. And he is royalty. So essentially, that was a thing that happened in his life. In college, he's trying to build this machine to contact the Netherworld. Reed Richards is actually, I don't know, he comes into his lab or something like that, notices Doom's notes on them, and Reed basically says, like, I think your equations might be off. You might want to reconsider how you do this. But Dr. Doom goes like, foolish, Reed Richards, Doom wants to do what Doom wants to do. So Doom built his device and it exploded in his face. And he had like a scar on him that the comic never showed, and the cartoon adaptation also never showed. They show him looking into a mirror at his face, and he goes like, "I hate this face," and he smashes the mirror. And then he goes, and then Victor Von Doom goes into like, I don't know, Tibet or something, and sees some monks, and they're the ones that develop this armor for him. And they're the ones that give him the iron mask or something like that. And that's how Doom has this sort of thing. Okay, I just fast forward through Doom's origin story. So here's how my Fantastic Four meets the Incredibles story goes. Doom is going to be essentially looking through the netherworld for traces of his mother. And then he finds not his mother, but Syndrome. Yes, Syndrome, the villain from the original Incredibles movie that died at the end of the Fantastic Four because he was dumb enough to wear a cape. Yeah, I'm sure you remember the scene where he got sucked into a jet engine. So he's going to be dead in this thing. And so naturally, Doom starts a conversation with him. And apparently, they actually at first are thinking that they're both talking about a fantastic, essentially a foursome of superheroes. And Syndrome thinks that Doom is talking about the Incredibles, and Doom thinks that Syndrome is talking about the Fantastic Four. But then they start to talk and they realize, well, they're both wrong. And that Doom suddenly realizes that there's another dimension in this world where the Incredibles are essentially the Fantastic Four of that universe. So what happens? Doom decides to cross into the Incredibles universe. Now, I haven't figured out how this battle would play out, because here's the thing about the Incredibles. They do seem to have some sort of timeline that they go with. So Doom would be stepping into essentially 60s America and stuff like that. I don't really know how that would jive with the whole whatever the heck timeline that Marvel is using and stuff like that. So when Doom comes in, he starts to take on the Fantastic Four. And here's the thing about Doom facing the Fantastic Four head on. He has actually done it very well. With enough prep time and enough traps, he has been able to capture and take the Fantastic Four alive, of course. He's figured out things to do and ways around the powers of the Fantastic Four so that he doesn't get caught. He's kind of like Batman. He's sort of that guy that if he had all the prep time in the world, he would figure out a way to defeat essentially the Fantastic Four. Hang on, I need some water here. So we have this world where essentially Dr. Doom essentially goes into the Incredibles universe. So I've seen this sort of plot before where essentially Dr. Doom is up to something and then the Fantastic Four try and get ahead of it. So maybe what happens is that once it's revealed that maybe Dr. Doom has been missing, the Fantastic Four actually go to investigate this because they fear that Doom is up to his old tricks, which always result in some badness on the Fantastic Four's part. So from there, the Fantastic Four cross into the Incredibles universe. So whenever I have that team up, you always have maybe, I actually thought about doing this story a little bit differently because like I've said before, a lot of superhero team up stories often involve the main characters getting together and then fighting another, and then suddenly realizing like, oh, we're actually on the same side. Who's the villain that we're supposed to go against? And then from there, they kind of get to that. So here's what I want to do. I'm going to open up, oh, actually, no, I'm not going to do this yet, but basically, the idea is the Fantastic Four and the Incredibles meet, and they actually take down Dr. Doom together. And they actually do that very quickly in the very first opening of this thing. Now, here's the funny thing. How in the world are we going to have some sort of, I don't know, conflict that's going to take place over both universes? Who knows? Do we want to get Galactus involved in this? I don't know. Maybe the Incredibles, we could make up a villain for them, but the Incredibles only have like really a handful of villains. I mean, and Syndrome is already dead, and Screenslayer, I'm not sure. I don't think she perished at the end of that thing. I don't really even remember, honestly. And now they could bring back the Underminer because he's kind of like the Mole Man. And oh shoot, yeah, could we bring back both the Mole Man and the Underminer because they're kind of the very similar characters? Oh, that would be awesome. Shoot, yeah, let's do that. I think the Incredibles, I actually think there is a third one on the way. So maybe there's some villain there we could pull from. Some cosmic villain, maybe Galactus and that could team up and something like that. And then the Fantastic Four would have to fight against that with the Incredibles. I don't know. I think that you could do a lot with this idea here. And Disney, come on, it's right there. You can just, if you want, do you want me to write that comic? Send me a message and I'll help write that comic for you. But let me work with an artist because I'm more of a writer rather than an artist. But I can see a lot of great conversations that would happen. And here's the thing, when I'm going to be talking about these crazy crossovers, I'm going to be talking about the conversations that would inevitably show up on this thing. If you know anything about the Thing is essentially what makes him the most interesting Marvel character, and for a while he was kind of the poster boy for Marvel, is the fact that he's always the Thing. He's in that kind of orange brick form, and he can't get out of it. That's the worst part about being the Thing. And because of that, he is kind of stuck in that form. And there's been a few times in the Fantastic Four, I think, that he's been cured or that there's been a temporary cure, but he always ends up being the Thing again. And that's a sad thing. And the fact that, I realize I kind of made a pun there, but the fact is, this is something that Bob Parr, as Mr. Incredible, he essentially can look human. Ben Grimm cannot pass for human because he can't just shift himself back in there. There's actually, I'm going to do an little side here. There was actually a Thing cartoon that they made back in the 70s where a teenager named Ben Grimm takes this thing and goes, "Thing ring, do your thing." And then he puts on the ring and becomes a Thing. That was such a dumb idea because that really, you don't understand the Thing if you can make that up. Because the Thing is always the Thing, and he's very sad because of this. As he's stuck in a prison without walls. And I think that actually makes that kind of interesting. To see him talk to Bob Parr about all this stuff would be kind of awesome. It would also be awesome seeing like Violet and the Invisible Woman talking together about how they use their shields, and how I actually think that Violet doesn't use her shields she can use them to make like spheres around the people and stuff like that. I've kind of noticed that sort of does, and she can make walls. I've never really seen her use it to make like, say, for example, like when I was reading the Fantastic Four comics, there were several times where Sue would make something like the body of a jet, and then her brother Johnny would be the propulsion for the jet as the Human Torch. I always thought that was a really interesting way that the Fantastic Four would use their powers like that, in teamwork and stuff like that. For example, there were times where, Reed would stretch out and like a slingshot, and then the Thing would be the ball that the slingshot would shoot or whatever. That was always really cool. That's always great superhero teamwork. And it's what kept me reading Fantastic Four comics, really. So anyway, so they can have like conversations like that. As far as like the Human Torch and Dash, I mean, their powers are quite different, but I think that I would love to see a scene, because I mean the Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm, he's always kind of a hothead, literally, and he's very vain, and he's kind of that was sort of his always persona. I would like to see him do a scene where he actually kind of has a man-to-man talk with Dash about like, hey, don't try and be this guy who tries to upstage everybody. You're a member of a team. This is something I have to learn. That would be a very sweet conversation, really. Now, as far as like, Elastigirl and Mr. Fantastic, I have to admit their personalities are very different. I'm not really sure what they could really talk about as far as like maybe how they'd use their stretching and stuff like that. There's a lot of characters that stretch in comics, like say Plastic Man, but Plastic Man is almost like a shape changer, really. And he uses his shape-shifting ability of stretching very oddly sometimes. And he'll switch into like something like that. Reed is just basically like, there's a wrench over here, I'm going to stretch my arm to get it, that kind of thing. And then sometimes he can use his body as kind of like a shield. He'll sometimes stretch his body around his friends, and then something like that. So yeah, and there were times in the comic where he would stretch his body around them, and then he said, okay, Sue, make a force field around this thing, and then keep its shape. And then, there was a lot of cool stuff like that. So yeah, eventually you'd have to find an enemy for these two guys to stop. And I like the idea of having the Mole Man and the Underminer team up together. I actually think they have very different goals. Hey, maybe the Underminer can say like, hey, there's this whole other world over here that I can take over, and then the mole man can say, hey, could I take over your world? Something like that. That would be kind of awesome. And there's sort of this dimensional rift between them that Dr. Doom left open. Then Dr. Doom could escape, and then they both have to take all these villains down together, which would really make, then you could really talk about family and the importance of it, because, hey, the Incredibles are, in fact, a family. They are all related by blood. But the Fantastic Four, it's really their powers together that kind of made them a family, although Sue and Johnny are related. But Reed and Sue, of course, they got married like very early on in the creation of the Fantastic Four. And the fact that essentially like Ben is Reed's best friend and pretty much, I think, the godfather for his son, that's pretty good. I think that's pretty much all the ideas that I had for this kind of crossover. I'm going to see if I can't get any. I really failed as far as like during this thing, as far as getting other people on here. I don't really know to do that because, I guess I'm going to have to kind of learn. But I mean, hey, all I really had to do, I linked with some guy. I talked about hot sauce. What am I going to do as far as that goes? I have no idea what I'm going to do. Really. Just like, apparently I got 99 plus new messages here. I don't really know how that is possible. And if so, am I supposed to invite someone? I really want to have a special guest on here who's someone like me, who's a content creator that talks about film and TV. So if I can have that, that would be a really cool thing to have on here. I'm sure it'd be really awesome to have on here when I start getting into some of the other things. I might as well just continue talking about what I'm going to talk about for the next 3 days. I'm going to do a live show tomorrow talking about Men in Black Meet the Ghostbusters. That'll probably be me just blabbing about how much I like Men in Black and Ghostbusters, and then talking about my initial idea about how to do that. Or actually, I don't even really have an idea on that. At least for The Incredibles, I actually had the seed of an idea there, but I really had never really developed that. I probably could have just sat down and maybe sculpted some things out. Maybe I could even have some sort of whiteboard back here and write ideas and stuff like that. Maybe have you guys participate, but I can't figure out how to use this kind of stuff. Although I'm trying, and maybe I'll get this down. And since I'm using that on both TikTok and, maybe I might have to just pick one on this because, dude, I don't really know how to do this kind of stuff and stuff. If you guys want to send me a message on TikTok and maybe figure out how you've done this before, because I'm hoping I'm getting some viewership on this. That's kind of what I'm doing on here. And I'm hoping that essentially I was told like somebody subscribed to me, and that was really nice. And I subscribed to them back because, I think that's good, tit for tat kind of thing. But yeah, I'm not really going to be, Anyway, so let's get to Thursday. Thursday, shoot, I've forgotten my topic for Thursday. What is that topic? Oh my gosh, I can't believe I've forgotten this. Oh yeah, Harry Potter meets Lord of the Rings. Yeah, we're going to try and do that one. That one I have a germ of an idea of how that they can make that work, but it's really far-fetched. But then again, those stories are pretty freaking far-fetched. So what are you going to do? Huh? Well, you can try and tell this. Anyway, and then Friday is going to be the one that I, hopefully I'll figure out a lot of this stuff by then, because I really want to hear people's comments on this. I really want to do Star Wars meets Star Trek. I really want to just mix those two worlds together and see what happens. Maybe you shouldn't mix those things like beer and wine. Maybe you just shouldn't do that. I don't know. We'll find out if we shouldn't. Just like mixing, say, Steven Spielberg with Stanley Kubrick. That end result was the film AI, Artificial Intelligence. Not exactly a landmark film, but all of us at least know it, don't we? And yeah, and it kind of didn't really end up being all that well. But we're going to see how that turns out here. So let's see. There's not really much I can really say here. I've started a Patreon campaign. If you're still listening, feel free to donate to that. I would appreciate that. And also I'm planning on spreading that out and seeing how much I can really do this. Like if you have a topic that you want me to hear me talk about, maybe we can add that to the slush pile and then figure out where to go from there. I appreciate the hearts that are being given me from now, although I know who's giving them to me. And also, thank you very much. Or at least I think who's giving them to me. I hope so. If you're, okay, maybe I better not get into that. Anyway, so, I'm just experimenting this week. I don't have any plan as far as what I want to do for my live shows next week. I do want to start, there are topics I'm thinking about doing where I'm taking two shows that are very similar and kind of comparing them, figuring out like which one does this concept better. So very similar shows. Like I had an idea about The Office and Parks and Recreation. I felt that these are shows that are rather similar, and I could pick out which one I think does better. But hey, I realize that this is all subjective, and I can figure out how to do this. With the crazy crossovers, I figured out, okay, if you actually really wanted to team up this with this, how would you do this? Because I imagine that at some point in time, someone had to figure out Superman meets Spider-Man, and they had to come up with a script for it. And X-Men meets Teen Titans, and they did that. They have done a Justice League meets the Avengers. That's been done. And they had to cross universes to do that. So much of my stories do involve like cross universes and stuff like that. Anyway, it's getting to be about 4 o'clock, which is when I wanted to quit on this. So I think I'm going to sign off right now. Hopefully you'll see more on this next time. Anyway, this is Mark Rollins from Geek Church signing off.